This is the Speaking of Writers podcast. I'm Steve Richards. As the author of five best-selling thrillers, Emily Carpenter has earned wide critical acclaim and a devoted readership for her signature blend of gothic suspense and horror set in the atmospheric South, where she was born and raised. The former actor, producer, and screenwriter who grew up in Alabama and lives in Georgia now has been telling immersive stories all her life, and she's passionate about exploring resonant and universal themes in her fiction. This is her sixth novel, Gothictown. It's mesmerizing, sinister, and totally unexpected as a seemingly idyllic Southern community turns out to be hiding dark, deep-rooted secrets from the outsiders it seeks to entice. When Manhattan restaurateur Billy Hope gets an email soliciting new residents to boost the economy of the little town of Juliana, Georgia, it seems like a dream come true. For $100, she can purchase a spacious Victorian home and leave behind her cramped apartment and the painful memories of her failed restaurant, starting a fresh new life with her husband Peter and her daughter Mare. Plus, she'll get a business grant to open a new restaurant in a charming riverside community laden with opportunity. They move quickly and find that Juliana is everything they were promised. A world away from city living, a gentle jewel with weather as warm and inviting as its inhabitants. But after settling in the bucolic village, Billy realizes something is off. Its citizens, especially the three founding families known as the Old Guard, are so fanatically committed to the town's well-being that it seems they'll sweep unpaid taxes, disappearances, and even deaths under the rug. And they're physically affected, with Peter experiencing insomnia and fits of temper as Billy and Mare both suffer from vivid nightmares. Suspicious and paranoid, Billy makes a horrifying discovery that will send her on a race to uncover the truth about Juliana's secret past and what the old guard will do to keep their secrets buried and Billy part of their gentle Juliana forever. Emily Carpenter, best-selling author of novels of suspense. After graduating from Auburn University in Alabama with a Bachelor of Arts in Speech Communication, Emily moved to New York City. She's worked as an actor, producer, screenwriter, and behind-the-scenes soap opera assistant for the CBS shows As the World Turns and Guiding Light. Emily's a member of International Thriller Writers, Mystery Writers of America, and Sisters in Crime. As I mentioned, born and raised in Birmingham, Alabama, now lives in Atlanta, Georgia, with her family. Happy to have, for the first time, Emily Carpenter join me here on the Speaking of Writers podcast. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I love how you sort of read that whole synopsis. I really want to take you on book tour with me now.
I'll be happy to join you, Emily. So, what is the backstory and inspiration behind Gothictown?
So, a couple of things kind of coalesced to bring this book into being. I think it started with back in 2017. I was starting to see a lot of articles in the news about American cities having these economic initiatives to try to get people to move to their cities. I remember reading about like Topeka, Kansas, and a place in South Dakota, and they were all sort of offering some sort of incentive for people to come, and so that kind of set in the back of my mind. And then as I was the pandemic happened, and then I started seeing like one article in particular caught my attention was a small southern Italian town, a village really, and they were basically giving away these ancient villas for €1. And this one town in particular, I mean, it was just dying. It was like a ghost town, and they really needed people to come and sort of not only boost their economy, but just like become citizens and keep this town alive. And, I immediately, the way my mind works, I was like, oh, well, village is definitely full of vampires and they need fresh blood. And so I started playing with that idea, but sort of pivoted to kind of what I do, which is Southern Gothic and always based in Georgia or Alabama. So I just kind of really thought of that story, but set in the South.
Let's talk about the characters here. Billy Hope and Peter, deeply flawed. How did you create these characters?
Well, for Billy, I just knew that she was going to be sort of she was going to lead her family to this town. And I knew that she was going to be a strong woman. She was going to be, very ambitious. And, but then she was also going to feel the weight of that decision she made and the fact that she sort of persuaded her family, to do this. So originally I thought, maybe she's going to be a bookstore owner. I knew it was going to be very important and sort of intrinsic to the story to figure out what she did for a living. And then, I again like more pandemic stories about restaurants closing and just the kind of the heartbreak of especially in New York City, and because that restaurant culture is so prevalent. So the idea, and at the same time, I was working at my friend's restaurant here in Roswell. And really, that was the first time I had ever worked in the service industry, which I've done a lot of jobs, but this was, all these dots were connecting for me. And I was like, oh, yeah, Billy is definitely a restaurateur. She owned a restaurant, very popular in Manhattan. And, this has like really been a blow, to her. And then with Peter, I knew that I needed, a kind of like understanding, easygoing guy, who could work remotely. And I was like, oh my gosh, he's a therapist. Absolutely. And he's very patient with his wife, and I think he's a great husband, but and also it was very important that he be able to transfer his career down to this town. So it really did kind of originate from their jobs, and then their personalities kind of grew out of that.
Let's talk about this town, the fictional town of Juliana, Georgia. Great story behind it and how you created it. And I'm a Civil War buff, so there's a lot of that in this town too.
Yeah, I knew there were a couple of things happening with Juliana. I knew Juliana had a terrible secret, that Billy and her family would stumble on. And I knew that it was a terrible secret in the past, but that it also affected everyday life in Juliana. So I'm speaking very carefully here because I don't want to give away too much. But I will say in the very first chapter of the book, I do tell you what happened in Juliana. Like, you don't have to go through the whole book to find out the backstory. I tell it, up front, here's what happens, here's what these people did, and here's the fallout from it. And, obviously there are more reveals and twists as the book goes on. But yeah, the backstory of Juliana is that it was in the path of it's in the South, obviously, in the Confederacy, and they are in the path of General Sherman as he's marching his way to Atlanta. And if you know much about the Civil War, you know that he burned down a lot of Georgia,
Mm.
including Atlanta, on his path to the sea. And he, in every town he stopped in, whatever their um, industry was, he burned it to the ground. And he actually did that in Roswell, in the town I live in. Roswell had cotton and wool mills, and they were making cloth and rope for the Confederates. And they flew a French flag over their mill, tried to pretend like they were French or something, and yeah, Sherman did not fall for that in the least. And he burned down the mills and he put the women and children who were working in the mills at the time, put them on trains and sent them to Kentucky and Ohio and Indiana. And they were dispersed in that way. And when the men who were fighting on the Confederate even in the Confederate Army came back, they found their families gone. So that story I have known for a long time about Roswell. So it was kind of cool to be able to incorporate that into the backstory of Juliana.
Emily, what's the story behind you becoming a writer and your interest in the Southern Gothic genre?
I did not I originally wanted to be an actor. And like I love to read and I always loved writing, but I think acting and writing are, two sides of the same coin. You're storytelling, but I thought I really wanted to be an actor. I did a lot of acting in college, and then when I got out of college, and I realized, that was a really tough business, and when I worked for the soap operas at CBS in New York, I was really sort of awed by the writers that worked in daytime and very just impressed by the work that they did. And that kind of started steering me towards writing. And at first I wanted to be with this sort of acting, the love of acting and theater. I wanted to write movies, and that I discovered also was a really difficult business to break into. And so as I started to like have a family and raise my kids, that's when I kind of finally discovered um, fiction writing. And I wrote a novel, and I could not find an agent with that novel. And so then I wrote another novel, and that one actually I got an agent with, and I ended up selling that one in a two-book deal.
What does a typical writing day look like for you?
So when I'm drafting a new book, I'm pretty strict with myself, and because it's for me, it's all about momentum. It's so we've all started things that we haven't finished, and a lot of writers, including myself, I have started stories or books that we don't finish. So I'm kind of superstitious about when I finally sit down to write a book. I'm going to sit down every day, usually in the morning, probably around 9 o'clock, not too early, but I'm I'm gonna get those words in. I'm gonna get at least 2,000 words in a day. And just keep going, keep rolling with the story fresh in my mind. It's almost like it's almost like I'm living this story. So I don't want to put it down and walk away from it until I'm finished. And then once I finish, I don't have to write every day, and certainly editing is a different experience for me. I don't have any like I have to do 50 pages or I have to, I just do what I can. But yeah, I'm a morning writer, and then round about 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock, it's like my brain hurts. So I have to quit. And I take a lot of breaks. I walk my dogs. I have two dogs, and I eat snacks, I go for a walk, I take a shower.
How do you get in the mood when you're writing a very emotional scene?
That's really hard. It's it's hard for me to, on the outset, to say, I am going to write an emotional scene. But that's what you want. You're always aiming for to emotionally connect with the reader. And the first pass usually doesn't do that. So, first, what I do is I take the pressure off myself and I'm like, self, the first pass is not going to be good. Like it's okay. Just write the scene and you can edit it. But I will say that maybe in the second pass or the third pass, sometimes I do use very emotional music to get me in the headspace. Um, or I kind of it's so hard to describe, but sometimes when I'm walking and I'm thinking through a scene in my mind and I know what I want it to feel like, I know the tone or as the young people say, the vibe. I really just try to like hold that feeling inside me as I write. Um, and sometimes it works and it comes out on the page, and sometimes it doesn't right away. It's such a elusive process.
How do you come up with the names of your characters? Did I read in one of the notes that you use cat names in this one?
Well, so for the cat, I did my manager at Fellows, the restaurant where I worked. He had a cat named Ramsey. So I was like, I'm putting Ramsey in this book. I'm gonna make Ramsey famous. He's gonna get up to all sorts of trouble. So that was kind of fun. I names are really important to me, and I almost can't start a new book until I have the exact right name for the main characters. I'm okay with, naming secondary characters as we go, but a name is so important and it conveys more than just like the age of the person, but it's kind of their persona and their personality and kind of their aura. So it's real. It takes me a long time to like get to the names, but I use a lot of in my ancestry.com like family tree, I use a lot of the surnames from my ancestors. And one little tidbit is I have a character in my third book named Daphne Amos, and she is one of my favorite characters that I've ever written. And she didn't have a family. She was in the foster system and was very, very lonely and very driven to create a family. And so now in every book I write, I put a character in there with the last name of Amos that is actually her family that
Mm.
maybe she didn't know about. So I've started to have a character named with the surname of Amos in every book for Daphne.
What makes Daphne your favorite so far?
I don't know if she's still my favorite, but I think they're all, it's like kids. They're
Mm.
like, I love all my kids, but they're different people and and I have a different relationship with each of them. But like Daphne just kind of broke my heart a little bit, because she just was so desperately wanted to create this family around her. And she kept even from her childhood, she kept trying to do it. And I mean, frankly, I personally, I grew up with a mom and a dad and siblings, and the thought of growing up in the system and having to be moved around and not having parents and a sibling, just, I don't know. I had a lot of empathy for her in a way that kind of it was strange to feel that way about a character I made up.
Emily, what's the best thing about being an author?
What's the best thing? Is that what you said?
Hmm. Yes. Best thing about being an author.
I would say that being able to create a world of your own and to tell the story that you want to tell um, is just and and reaching for that vision you have and sometimes falling short, but the process of reaching for the vision that you have in your mind is so much fun.
Hmm.
It's just I it is so much fun. Like some people love to climb mountains, some people love to, do heart surgery. I love to create a story and a world and characters that match up with what appeared in my mind.
Emily Carpenter's sixth novel is Gothictown, and Gothictown is going to be a TV series too on AMC.
Yes, fingers crossed. Yes, yes. Um, Still in early stages of development, but yeah, hopefully that's going to happen.
And how involved will you be with that?
I'll be co-producer and consult on all the episodes and more in a creative capacity. Like I'm not going to be hiring or firing or dealing with money or budgeting or anything like that, but definitely creative co-producer.
All right, and you can connect with Emily Carpenter online. She has a website, emilycarpenterauthor.com, and she's all over social media as well. The sixth novel from Emily Carpenter, Gothictown, is out now. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
And this is the Speaking of Writers podcast.